First off, I'd like to thank Mr. Geoff Stirling for coming out
You're
and
welcome.
doing this Q&A with us. It's fantastic. So I have a couple of questions here. I tried to make it so everybody,
Right.
everybody that I could think of would have a question. I tried to figure out what they might want to ask. So first off, I'd like to ask, what was your favorite film of all time?
The favorite
Film of all time.
of all times? Gee, that's a big question.
Mm-hmm.
I think the one that impressed me, the first time I saw it in Rome was the follow-up to Star Wars and maybe Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to define the best film. It's because on so many levels. Not only that, but we've only seen a fraction of the films, really. But you know, Peter O'Toole, who was pretty tremendous in that film. And strangely enough, the whole concept of Arabia and Saudi Arabia, and which all of that area was Persia. Iraq was Persia. So that putting it together and asking ourselves how it unfolded is amazing, because the Arab world is, you know, 1 billion people who believe in Allah, and Muhammad was his messenger, and Allah is the one God. So I've always found it difficult to see why we have a confrontation. If there's only one God, what's the problem? But Castro doesn't believe there's a God. I ask him the question, if you believe in the brotherhood of man, what about the fatherhood of God?
What was his answer?
Well, I never got to ask him. We put it in writing,
Right.
and we submitted it. See, when he saw, he was the dean of the law school. I mean, he wasn't a peasant, and he had 40 or 50 professors under him as the dean. And when he came down, I was there in Cuba 2 days before before he came and took over Havana. And I couldn't understand why I was in this beautiful hotel in just outside of Cuba. And I was the only, along with Stan Waterman, I was the only guest. And we had 9 waiters around us in a dining room that held 300. And I thought, you know, it's 2 days before Christmas or whatever in December. And I thought, you know, there's got to be something going on. I'm not. And I guess that was the revolution. But hardly a shot was fired, you know. They marched in and took over. But my favorite film, obviously, was, there's so many of them, like yourself, I mean, but I'll settle for Saudi.
Yeah.
I'll settle for
Lawrence of
Arabia.
Yeah, it was a great film. Oh, since we're talking about Castro, and this Q&A is right after the Waiting for Fidel, what were your ambitions for Waiting for Fidel?
Well, it was a confrontation, it still is, between those who think socialism is going to work, where the state employs everybody. For example, in China, if you have more than one child right now, you're docked 18% of your salary for 20 years.
Really?
Yeah, because if they don't stop the overpopulation, they're going to destroy the country. In Japan, in Japan, they have 100,000 legal abortions every 2 weeks. So if they had not done that in the last 40 years since the war, you would have over 350 million Japanese.
Yeah. The director, Mike Rubbo, so I guess that's how you pronounce it, or Rubbo. Mike Rubbo?
Mike Robo.
How did he approach you in getting this film made?
He's an Australian filmmaker, and when I approached the National Film Board, because I wasn't about to go in Cuba without official sanctity. I mean, we had the second cameraman was a former Mountie.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, because you're going into a socialist country, and when we tried to get
communist country.
they came on board the plane and wanted I think it was $2,000 exit, which fortunately I had on me. or I might still be there. But Joey, you know, because he defended communism and socialism so strongly, I haven't released the other 19 hours. In fact, we got 27 hours.
That was the question I was going to ask you. What are you going to do with that footage?
Well, I looked at it, some of it, and we got to sync it because it's all 16 millimeter, and we got to sync it to sound. And that's a big job. It took us 18 months to finish Waiting for Fidel after the post-production.
18 months.
Yeah, the editing.
The funding part of Waiting for Fidel, there was yourself, your Apache Communications, and NFB. What parts did they play?
Well, I paid all the jets. The big expense was the jets,
right,
and the film and Joey, because I paid Joe. I've yet to collect a nickel out of this.
Yeah.
But I absorbed all of the basic costs. They took it back to the film board and did the editing.
Mike, I guess, himself, yeah.
Yeah, Mike is, but I left him in Cuba. He thought, look, if you leave us here, maybe after, because I was there 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And I had no idea that the CIA were trying to kill him. They had sent in
Fidel, you mean?
Poison cigars, tips of cigars. They had hitmen everywhere. You'll see in the film when he's at the end of the film when he's meeting the premier, the chancellor of East Germany, who's now dead.
Yeah.
But you'll see he's got a bulletproof vest on, and he's moving around, and he's not a target at any time.
Right.
He's moving, and he's putting his arm around the guy's shoulder and moving him back, and he's obviously aware that they're trying to get him. And that's why he held off, because I arrived on the plane, and it shows in the film, and I'm reading the book, The Invisible Government, the CIA. Yeah. And that was sort of probably alerted them a little bit.
And how did you get any feeling that they were watching what you guys were doing?
Well, there's a scene, there's a scene there where I had written this poem, "Oh, to live in happy," I forget its parts of it, the happy workers toiling for the state. If they hit their quota on Sundays, they can sleep in late.
Right.
Well, I had 47 verses, and they went up to my room and got it. And I could tell that they had, because it wasn't in the same place, and
right,
the tape, they had made a copy of the tape. And I thought, well, it's the truth.
That's an enormous amount of pressure, though, with the most powerful country in the world, the CIA.
Mike's whole point is, he said to me when we had the confrontation on 40 to 1, 20 to 1, he said, look, we're here to make a love affair between Cuba and Canada. Mm. In those days, the United States, even more than today, were very uptight with any country that dared deal with Cuba.
Right.
And so Canada, got away with it.
Well, how difficult was it to get permission to shoot in Cuba itself?
Well, Gorbachev stopped in Gander on his way to the United Nations conference. And I said to Joe, if you go to Gander to meet Khrushchev, what about asking him if I can come down to Cuba and do a film of free enterprise versus socialism?
Right.
So he phoned me from Gander and said, Fidel has agreed. So I said, fantastic, set a date, and we did. And I'll pick you up when you go back to Florida. I'll pick you up in Florida and on a jet, take you over to Nassau, because I can't go in directly from Florida. You can't go in from the United States. So you can come in from Nassau. So I flew him to Nassau, and then we both flew into Cuba.
How difficult was it to get Smallwood involved?
How did I?
No, how difficult was it? Was he all for it right from the get-go?
I just phoned him and asked him. He was up for anything in those days.
Excellent.
These were the days when, the last days of his power.
That's right.
And I'd just come back from putting on some stations in Arizona. So I phoned him from the ranch because I heard that Khrushchev was going to go to Cuba, going to go to Gander.
Right.
So that's where he got permission. That's how we started.
And how did the meeting with Smallwood went there to meet him?
Yeah.
And how did that meeting went over? Well, obviously.
Well, it went very successfully, because they Smallwood is very very enthusiastic about anything, but particularly social problems where you had to build a city as big as St. John's in 10 years
Right.
for the overflow, because they don't go into abortion there, not like Japan.
Was Smallwood happy with the way it was portrayed, and was he happy with the film?
Yeah, he was delighted with the film. In fact, he sent out copies to everybody he could think of. Because we didn't know what to expect. I mean, in Cuba, we didn't know how hostile it would be. But I found it great. I enjoyed every minute of it.
It's a dangerous time to go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they've invited me back, and I sent a copy to the ambassador, and I didn't hear back from him because Castro is not the key man in Cuba. The key man in Cuba, as far as running it, is his brother,
yeah.
whose picture you'll never see, Rafael.
Right.
And he runs it. He runs the secret police, you know, as far as I understand. That controls your country.
And has he invited you down? He has?
Pardon?
He's invited you to come back down?
No, he hasn't invited us. The film board
Right.
in Cuba approached us to see if we're interested.
Right.
Because I'm not interested in going back. What for? I mean, what are you going to prove? All you're going to prove is not working. You know, and that's not going to get you a happy reception.
No.
Put it mildly.